All right, guys, welcome back, Film Lovers Guide to the Galaxy podcast, where we talk about movies you may have seen, recognized, or never heard of at all. I'm one of your co-hosts, Johnny, and with always, I'm joined here by Joe and Jared. How we doing today, guys?
What up?
If our voices are like an octave lower, it's because we're recording in the morning.
Not for me, baby.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be cool for this episode. Amazon Prime, they're touting Eddie Murphy's return as Prince, or now King Akeem, and coming to America. We thought it'd be pretty cool to focus our time to objectively come up with top 5 lists for Eddie Murphy's movie list. Before we do all that, let me start with Joe. How do you feel about Eddie Murphy and the movies that he's done so far?
I think, sort of growing up, Eddie Murphy was a staple in a lot of the movies I watched. I think he was an excellent comedian, and a lot of people would know that he was a comedian in the past, and when he did a lot of movies and all that. So, I liked all the things he did. I was a big fan of the Shrek series. I liked him in Mulan. So I very much liked him. He had a very unique voice. He had a very unique way of delivering all his lines. I wish that he was a little bit more active. He's doing his own thing, but I still think he's still an excellent actor and excellent comic. So that's just my opinion on him in general.
I think voice actor Eddie Murphy is great. The
Uh-oh.
Shrek movies are great. Mulan was great. I think his live action Beverly Hills Cop, I think all of that's great. But there's a clear line, I want to say maybe after Nutty Professor, where he just takes anything. And it's kind of crazy of like Daddy Daycare. We're going to do Bowfingers. Anybody remember Bowfinger? That was
Yeah.
a movie.
Yep.
And crazy. And like it just seemed, and like he did the Haunted Mansion. He did all of that stuff. And it was just like, wait, what? Like huh.
Do you ever think that he just got limited roles for some reason?
No, absolutely not, because he was still touted as Eddie Murphy. Like
Right.
that name still had clout. It was really interesting to see, like he had such like a great career with like the, I guess you would call rated R comedy / whatever movies today,
Yeah.
with like 48 Hours, Beverly Hills Cop, and then like it just kind of petered out into what we have now. I love the Shrek movies. I love I mean, I like Mulan a lot, but yeah, it's just really interesting to see how his career has changed over the years. I love his stand up. Yeah, I don't know. Like the latter era Eddie Murphy hasn't been my favorite thing. We'll just put it that way.
So I was prepping, and I was watching Coming to America, and I was telling my wife, "Hey, yeah, we're doing Eddie Murphy," and she's all like, "Best movie's been Haunted Mansion." I'm like, "Get out of here! You
Ooh.
can, you can, you can leave the room right now."
Ooh.
I can't tell if she was really joking or not, to be honest with you.
I don't know. She's pretty serious sometimes.
I think Eddie Murphy in his heyday was like riding on all cylinders. You're
Yeah,
talking about
totally.
like late '80s to even to like late '90s. It was really good. I think it was when he started doing things like Adventures of Pluto Nash, where I'm like,
Oh my
okay,
gosh, I
you
blocked
know,
that out of my memory.
try to regain his action status by doing I Spy with Owen
Oh
Wilson. um, you know, he's very lucky Shrek has kept him afloat in terms of
yeah,
the comedy and the money that's coming out of it. But I mean, he's had at least last year or 2 years ago in 2019, Dolomite Was My Name is a really good comeback for him. And that
oh
kind of,
yeah, I completely forgot that movie exists. I mean, it's been a crazy year, so
yeah,
I can't really remember anything. But
right.
like that, yeah, that Dolomite movie was actually really pretty spot on.
And that kind of leads us into Coming to America, the sequel to Coming to America, 30 years after sets place.
Just discovered that I may have a son here in this land. How much child support is she getting from? The king pays no child support.
No child support for 30 years and you came back? You was a dummy.
Movie is about, Prince Akeem about to become king and, has this struggling thing about how he has a bastard son in America and they come back to America and they come back to Zumanda, right? So I don't know how you guys. So I'll ask you guys. How do you guys feel about this movie?
Oh, I thought it was really underwhelming. It was almost like they were like kind of parodying the first one, and that's not kind of what I was looking for. I like I don't know. I don't really hold that much reverence for the first one anyway. I thought it was good. I thought it was absolutely fine. But this one was just like, oh, okay. Like, like it was just
The
wait,
thing is,
I,
okay, I
so
have a
many.
question,
Yeah, go
real
ahead.
quick. All honesty, I haven't watched this movie, but I've watched the first one. Is the second one sort of a semi-carbon copy of the first one, just kind of with a fresh paint and coat?
No, but it's also like a lot of, like I said, it just felt like a parody of the first one. They're kind of like trying to go back to the well
Ugh,
on a
okay.
lot of things. I don't know how
Yeah.
you felt, Johnny. I didn't really enjoy it. I felt it was like, man,
It treads the line of trying to be a sequel without trying to be a rehash at the same time.
yeah,
And sometimes it works, sometimes it fails. Now, Coming to America is funny for its time, but if you watch it in this lens now, there's a
it's
lot of things that
wild.
hasn't really aged well,
Yeah,
right? So that's kind of like some of the things within this movie that kind of harkens back to. Kind of sucks because Eddie Murphy is the lead in this movie, but he kind of really does take a back seat in a lot of the things that
hmm
happen in the movie, simply because this is more about the bastard son, and then they're trying to shoehorn his daughter, which I get what they're trying to do, but if you don't give her enough screen time, it doesn't really work all
totally.
that well, right? As well, like I thought it was okay. I'm not gonna rewatch it again.
Oh God,
The,
no,
on-
no.
the only reason why I would recommend people to even seek this movie out is one, if you are a Coming to America fan and you want to watch it, but two, Wesley Snipes is so good. I wanted more of General Izzy in that movie. Like he is so good in this movie.
Yeah, that it's probably my favorite Wesley Snipes thing that he's done outside of his cameo in What We Do in the Shadows first season, where he played like Blade, essentially. Like I know, I wouldn't say Joe that it was something with trying to with a fresh coat of paint, but it also is trying to go. I feel back. Like Johnny said, it's like a whole like it's trying to be something that straddles that line of like, oh, see, we're like this movie that you really liked while being a new thing. And it's
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
would have
Yeah.
liked
Yeah.
it way more if they just went like, hey, this is a brand new thing with characters that and all that kind of stuff. It would have just made, I can't tell you how many times I looked at my phone and I'm like, oh man, still got like 100 or
Ooh.
like 45 minutes left in this thing. Like,
And the movie's only an hour and 40 minutes.
yeah. I was like,
Right?
oh damn. Yeah. I don't know. Like watching movies at home, we talked about this in kind of the our little intro, but like watching movies at home versus the theater, it's so different. There's so many distractions. There's so many, I have the luxury of looking at my phone and being like, oh dear God, there's 40 minutes left still. What is going on?
On a side topic here, how many movies do you know of that you've watched that are 20 to 30 years apart that is a remake that you enjoyed that came out, you know?
Boy, is
Because
that even.
I have Blade Runner on my wall and I'm
Oh
like,
my
man,
God. Great pull.
yeah.
I
So I was thinking about that
that
one.
movie is so good.
Loved it. Loved it.
I absolutely loved it, which is making me excited for the Dune movie because it's the same director.
That's what I mean. I'm trying to think of other movies that came out with this kind of gap that are obviously
Yeah,
coming,
for a movie like that, I feel it's more challenging. For like Coming to America, like it's a comedy, so it shouldn't be that hard. You just got to do plot beats, boom, 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 and then like fill in with the funny stuff. You would think with all these funny people in the movie, it wouldn't be that hard, but it just was like it, I think the best way to describe it, it had a real identity crisis of catering to the old movie and then while still trying to be new, and that doesn't
yeah.
work with a 30-year-old gap.
To Joe's answer, I'll give you a couple ones. I was a big fan of Doctor Sleep. So The Shining and Doctor
Okay,
Sleep are
yeah,
two
Oh,
things that are
okay.
uh,
Horror. All
separate
right.
apart. Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. You're right. That's also there as well. Jared's second favorite movie of 2010s, was it Thunderdome and Mad Max Fury Road
Oh
are
yeah,
almost 30
totally.
years
I
apart
forgot
as
about that
well.
too.
And
Um,
notice these are all genre movies. These are all very niche. Not I don't want to say niche, but like these are all genre movies of like science fiction,
Action,
horror,
horror,
science
yep.
fiction, action.
Just not so
It's
much comedy, eh?
no,
yeah, Bad Boys 2 and Bad Boys for Life. Come on, you guys.
oh god. Ugh.
Oh,
um, and I don't know what that speaks to. Is it the change in kind of the landscape of comedy? Is it any of that stuff? Because I didn't feel this movie
Needed a
suffered from
sequel.
that.
This movie didn't need a sequel, but at the same time, I think you're right because if you watch it as a sequel, then you have expectations of what the comedy was back then, and so
Yeah, totally.
to now update the comedy till now, it seems like you're watching now. It's the good thing about it is that you see the changing of generation, so you
Hmm.
do see a change of comedy now. But if you were a fan of comedy that's in the 80s and your comedy hasn't grown or evolved, then you're not going to think it's funny, right? Or it seems like you're kind of pandering to us as it kind of moves on that way. We're going to start with our list. Like I said, we want to try to make this as somewhat objectively possible, knowing full well this is a very subjective medium that we're doing. So each slot has different criteria that we're going to do. The first one we're doing, as always, is kind of our box office champion. So there's two movies that we're pitting against one another. One is the one that made the most money versus the one that made money over its budget. So the one that Eddie Murphy's been in that has made the most money is Shrek 2,
oh
which at that
yeah.
time has
Hot
made
human Shrek is a draw,
Oh
is what you're
baby.
saying.
yes. So that movie itself made 919.8 million dollars through its lifetime. Compare that to a movie that had a only $13 million budget and made $316 million during the 80s, and that was Beverly Hills Cop.
Oh, the first one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll lead it off with you, Joe. Between these two movies, who do you think should represent this slot?
Oh man, so I liked I don't know if this applies to everyone, but I actually liked all three Beverly Hills Cop.
Whoa, even the third one?
I don't know, man. It's just I think in general though, my I'm more predisposed to if there's a trilogy, I tend to like, all right, okay, I want to give the whoever was directing or writing it to an opportunity to finish out whatever story it is. Now, the only exception to this is Fast and Furious 18 or whatever the hell they're making. It's clearly a cash grab, which is fine because you make $1 billion every movie, you got to keep on running that cow. Anyways, but that being said, Beverly Hills Cop is beyond my time, so I did watch it after the fact. Whereas Shrek, I sort of watched it as it sort of came out, and I'm a big fan of Shrek. I like all of the
Hmm.
Shreks. I like laughing at stupid ass things, and I think that
Where you been? I'm sorry, too. I should have stayed, but Shrek had this thing he had to do in a... What?
whoever was the original idea guy for Shrek, uh, was a genius. And I think that it sort of got into the whole, it's kind of memey nowadays. And I think a lot of people look at it sort of through a uh, rose colored lens. But I still like, I mean, animation wise, it's kind of like, because, technology back then was whatever. But like the storyline, and, Mike Myers, Eddie Murphy, excellent, excellent. So, I like Shrek too, and there's a reason it made almost $1 billion as an animated film. So that's my thing.
The clear winner here is Beverly Hills Cop.
Check Rolling Stone magazine's Axel Foley. That's what it is.
Now I'm going to give Shrek 2 its due. Like I said before, hot human Shrek is a draw. When he gets turned into a human, and it's super weird. But I think I really appreciate the Shrek movies. Shrek 2 is really when it hit its stride. That whole Knights parody of cops in that one is so funny. I will
Fantastic.
like it's one of the funniest bits they've ever done in that series. I would almost agree with you, Joe, if it didn't have so many sequels afterward. Um,
Okay.
and I guess Beverly Hills Cop is kind of the same thing, you could say, and I would totally understand that. But the first Beverly Hills Cop was an actual, like, it was like, whoa, this Eddie Murphy guy, like, it really made him a real movie, in my eyes at least. It made him like a movie star of like, oh man, this guy is funny. There are a couple action scenes that, I love Beverly Hills Cop. Like, it's one of those movies that you're flipping through channels. I don't know if people flip through channels anymore, but I kind of do. And you'll plop down right in the middle of it and be like, oh yeah, I'm here for the next 50 minutes and watching this thing till the end. It is so good. And I think it did more. I think if we're going by box office and like what did more for Eddie's career and that kind of stuff, it's got to be Beverly Hills Cop.
Yeah, it's because it's so early on in his career, I think. And
Yeah, it
sort
like
of
really. I don't
started.
think he would have gotten Shrek 2 without Beverly Hills Cop, in my mind.
You're right. You're 100% right, I think.
I'm actually going to agree with Jared here. I think it's Beverly Hills Cop. I love Shrek 2, and Donkey is a very big part of
He
it,
is.
right? Right, but
Oh yeah, he's
He's a comic relief, basically.
yeah, but for some reason, for me, Shrek 2, if I'm doing this based off the filmography of Eddie Murphy, like one has the lead, one has the support. And so he was the support in Shrek 2. He's never really taking the stage, even though he has the most memorable parts in that movie or in that series. But I love Beverly Hill Cop, right? I remember watching that movie and I was just like, this was the same guy in 48 Hours. I didn't care for 48 Hours.
Oh,
I think
48
it was
Hours is great.
oh man, no, I just thought it was whatever compared to Beverly Hills Cop. For some reason, the action and the comedy with it. Maybe because I like Judge Reinhold more than I do Nick Nolte, but whatever.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you know what? His playoff of those two, McTaggart and Judge Reinhold's character, really good, especially when they're in the strip club
yeah.
and like they play so well off each other. That's a really good point.
Side note: Nick Nolte is 80.
What? Oh man.
Man's getting old.
The Ang Lee's Hulk,
Yeah.
Nick Nolte, you mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then, plus, Beverly Hills Cop. Who forget who can when you think of that theme, it just
Oh
gets
yeah.
stuck in your head, right? It's at this
Yeah.
point,
Axel
it's
F.
kind of iconic. Yes. So I love both of these films, but I just love Beverly Hills Cop way more. And I think,
Yeah.
with that movie, that's how he started extending and getting more of these jobs as we kind of come along. So for that reason, to the one, I'm gonna put box office champion, we'll put Beverly Hills Cop in there.
All right, I guess.
So the second one, we deem this the field of excellence.
Outstanding achievement in the field of excellence.
So really, when we think about his career, we recognize him as a great comic, but when it comes to award ceremony time, especially through critics, Academy Awards, things like that, he doesn't really get recognized a lot, except for this one movie he was in, and it was Dreamgirls, where he won the Golden Globe, SAG Award, Critics' Choice for Best Supporting Actor, and got nominated that year. He lost to Alan Arkin in Little Miss Sunshine, which I guess.
It's
So
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's understandable.
it's
I
a
think.
it's a good role, but I'm pretty sure Eddie Murphy should have won that one too. He was sweeping everywhere else. Jared, since really there's no comparison. Usually I would want to come up with two movies, but really this is the only movie
Yeah.
that
Totally.
he got recognized for. How did you feel about Dreamgirls?
He was really fantastic in that movie. I loved Dreamgirls. I think it was a really, really good it's been a minute since I've seen it, so I'm trying to like remember it, but like you said, it's the only kind of one that meets this category. And as soon as you said Little Miss Sunshine, I was like, oh yeah, like it did lose to that, and it was kind of a big deal when he lost. And I feel that was a sense of them rewarding an older actor who has been around for a long time versus, not to say Eddie Murphy hadn't been around for a long time at that point, but Eddie Murphy was a comedian. He wasn't, and I feel a lot of his previous kind of movies that he made were kind of working against him. But yeah, I really think he should have won that award. I think he was great. that was the year that Jennifer Hudson won, right? And yeah, it was kind of like that, like she's the next big thing. Man, I going back and looking at that, it's kind of a tough look seeing. Not to say that Little Miss Sunshine isn't a good movie, but I didn't think it was on the level of Dreamgirls, really. With the music and everything, it was kind of a really nice package for that.
I mean, I like Dreamgirls.
Can't do it no more. I can't sing no more sad songs. Hey, Curtis, this supposed to be your night, right? Let's have some happy times.
But then I like a lot of things, to be fair. But I think Eddie Murphy had an interesting role because it was obviously a little bit more, so I guess relatively more serious on his end. I gotta say though, the only thing I could really think of when I was watching it is the fact that Jennifer Hudson was on American Idol
Mm-hmm.
and is likely the more successful ones because
Oh
I don't
yeah.
think she won, right? She was there for a while.
No,
Um,
and the big hubbub was Simon Pegg, or not Simon Pegg. I'm sorry,
Cowell.
Simon Cowell said that she needed to lose weight or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, he could get away with saying that shit back then, I guess, with the whole Me Too movement fucking him up later on. But I think that it just blew my mind. Like, man, this chick, she hedged her voice and her whatever, and got into acting, and now she's in a feature film, and she's doing really well, and her voice is great, and I think she's doing a great job. All that being said, again, so with Eddie Murphy, I think that he deserved this award. You know, I think about it more and more is the fact that whenever you see actors that go away from whatever their natural quote unquote natural role is and do something else and they do a good job of it, that they're at a serious consideration for whatever award that they qualify for. So I think that really applied here in terms of supporting, and I think that great movie, big fan. It is very deserving. I gotta say.
Dreamgirls, that I enjoy that movie a lot. I think as a musical, it's shocking. Like I'm looking at the movie, and when you're thinking about it, like Jennifer Hudson, kind of to me is the second person out of this. Yes, she won Best Supporting Actress. She's gone on to at least have a very good music career, but it's Eddie Murphy that really stands out amongst Beyonce before she became just Beyonce. Jamie Foxx, Danny Glover. Man, this movie was packed. It was really good, and Eddie Murphy just kind of solidified. And I do like what Joe's talking about because when comedians do serious roles, they kind of tend to get a lot of more recognition. But I'm starting to realize comedians are just better at dramas than serious actors are at comedy. And for
Oh
some reason,
yeah. Comedy is way harder to do than drama, in my mind. It I talk about this with my friend all the time, and she's acted in things, stage acted and things since she was a little kid. It is much harder to do comedy than drama. Like drama, it's like you throw something up there that's just inherently sad and people are going to get choked. Hell, people I know watch commercials for like, what was it, like Target or Kohl's, and they're like, oh my God, like, they'll cry. It's way harder to have a really funny comedy, or a genuinely funny piece that will last. I just that's just my opinion, but
I'm with you on that. I think that's true. I just think that it's harder to get an average person or average moviegoer to have a genuine laugh or chuckle at
yeah,
something than to feel sort of be like, oh my god, this is
yeah.
something else. So personally, I feel that way as well. So I'd have to say yes, that's true.
all right, guys. So in the next slot, we have Did We Get This Wrong? So we basically compare the critic score and audience score on Rotten Tomatoes and see where the biggest gulf is between the two and kind of discuss where we side with. There's this one movie that has a 59% difference between one another. The critics gave it a 21% overall. A consensus that says an all-star comedy lineup is wasted on paper-thin plot and painfully clunky dialogue, compared to the audience of 25,000 rating giving it 80%. That movie is 1989's Harlem Nights, which not
Mhm.
only starred Eddie Murphy, but comedy greats like Richard Pryor, Della Reese. I'll start with this first. I know last week or last episode, I was talking about Tree of Life and how audience didn't get it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's the other way around now,
The
baby.
critics don't get this. Like, this movie is funny. Like, I genuinely enjoy this movie. I'm like with the
Interesting.
audience on this.
Okay.
I came into it, I don't know. I just, it's funny because the first 5 minutes of this movie is looking at Richard Pryor, who kind of was doing like an underground gambling, and they're rolling dice, and this guy was getting nuts, and he's about to like rob him, and then this kid shoots that guy. And I was thinking to myself, am I really watching a comedy right now? But as the movie progressed, even though it was kind of serious in parts, uh, it got funnier and funnier. And I think these comedians going together, I thought was great. I get some of the criticisms that the critics had at the time, but I thought this movie was genuinely hilarious.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's a comedy, nor do I think it's a drama. I
Whoa.
think it's kind of I think it's pretty chaotic in its tone. That doesn't mean it's like I thought it was bad or anything, but it's like it's hard to get a read. There's some really funny, some really dramatic scenes. Noted, it's the only film that Eddie Murphy ever directed. I think he also wrote the screenplay too, and he really wanted to work with Richard Pryor because he was one of his comedy idols. I think it's a pretty good movie. In spite of that kind of tonal chaos it has going on. It used to be on it used to be on like cable movie channels all the time when I was growing up. I liked it, but it's just so weird, you know. There are a couple really iconic scenes in that. It took me a couple times watching it to really appreciate it, I think, as I got older and older. Because when I was younger, I was like, "Oh yeah, I just want to see a funny Eddie Murphy," and it was like, "Wait, what is this?" You know what I mean? And I think as I've gotten older, I've really appreciated it more for its incredible casting, and just seeing Della Reese say "fuck" multiple times is hilarious.
I've got to watch my girls until the last trick is gone, and I'm not about to ask no customer to roll over so I can punch some goddamn clock.
Telling everyone to kiss her entire ass, and that kind of stuff, and her just beating the shit out of Eddie Murphy was so funny. Yeah, and then, but that's also with hindsight of like, oh, she's ends up as an angel on TV. But yeah, I don't know. I don't blame them for kind of lampooning this movie as much as it is, just because it was like it's such kind of a weird thing. And that's the best way to describe it. It's a weird thing, but it's a good weird thing, you know.
I liked it. I think I'm gonna go kind of opposite. I'm saying it's both a comedy and a drama, but
Okay.
I understand that if it's a mix between the two, I can see how some people would think that it is kind of weird. I think that the reason a lot of critics expected more of this because Richard Pryor's a legend and Eddie Murphy's always, he's been big as well. So I feel like the biggest reason, and that's the biggest reason a lot of these critics expected more out of it, just because they have such a crazy cast, and I think that they expected it to be different. And I don't think that's very fair in the sense that, you should look at the movie as what it is rather than what you have pictured in your mind. And just as long as you can watch it within the context of the movie, and it's a cult classic, it's gonna be around. It's gonna be around forever. I think a lot of people that watched it anyways or know of it will always look at think of it fond, from just it's gonna have fond thoughts of it at all. I think the story was pretty good. I think that you have laugh moments, you have serious moments, and again, it's a classic '80s movie. I think '80s, '90s or '89. I think it's '89. Classic '80s movie. But I would always think that it's good. It's not. I personally, and this is coming from a guy who again has really bland taste. I'll never really think of it as one of my favorite movies of all time, but I will always think of it as a good movie. I have definitely have movies out there. I'm like, this movie is absolute shit, and that's a short list, but this movie is not one of them. So that's my opinion on it, and I still think the critics are wrong. and I would say 90% of the time I will disagree with the critics, because I think a lot of critics out there, especially on Rotten Tomatoes or on those websites, I swear to God, some of these guys are trolls, man. Some of these guys are like, I'm gonna hate a movie because all of everyone else likes it or something. And you look at their stupid ass reviews, I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've heard in my life, and I can't believe this guy is an approved critic on whatever. This guy deserves to lose his job, or this lady or whatever deserves to lose their job. I'm really hoping that's not the case here, and I think the general consensus is that they uh, think of it differently, but it's how it is. So that's my thoughts on the movie.
Let me read just a couple of reviews. So on the critic side, we have Roger Ebert, who starts off his review saying Eddie Murphy's Harlem Nights is an uninspired cross between the Cotton Club and the characters of Damon Runyon, told in cliches so broad you keep waiting for it to poke fun at itself, but it never does. God.
Okay.
And then you have this user, Sean J, that wrote, I often wonder how movie critics get given credibility they do. How often the audience score completely differs from the critics, almost like many of the critics are just too pompous to enjoy a good movie. By all means, pick a movie apart, but when you can't see the enjoyment value in anything anymore, maybe it's time to start critiquing. I mean, you can basically make an artsy movie full of nonsense and risk getting a better review these days. It's like throwing two cans of paint at a canvas and watching as they fall in love while shunning any piece that has soul or heart put into it.
Dude, I'm with that guy. That, and that was a user, right? Not a critic.
Yeah, that was a
So,
user.
I've always wondered, and this might be kind of a tangent, is when I'm looking at Roger Ebert and looking at his body of work with criticizing movies, I'm curious to know how much agree or disagree with him, because I never sat down and said, here are the 30 movies that I've watched that he gave a. He's only thumbs up, thumbs down kind of guy, right? So
His show was thumbs up, thumbs down, but
okay,
he's
so
written
let's say
more.
that he does ratings from 1 to 5, whatever's favorable, whatever is disfavorable. I'm just curious enough. I agree with him a lot, and in general, but I don't know, man. Like like I said, I think the user kind of identifies what I said. It's just I think that you know enjoy it for what it's supposed to be, right? Like if a movie is supposed to be like making fun of itself, and you don't like the fact that it's making fun of itself and gave it a bad review, then you miss the point, like the point of the movie. And I don't think that's doing it justice. And I hope that like having a bad critic review doesn't necessarily kill the movie. I'm curious to know if having a bad audience review kills the movie, because bottom line, it's money, right? So if a movie could be really good and make like $8, I think, and well, is an extreme, but I think most if you like if Warner Bros made a movie and they put 100 million in the movie and they got 50 million back, regardless of how many awards it wins, I still think the guys up top will be like, we failed. And I think if that ever happens, it's because the audience didn't like it.
Well, yeah, I think times are changing. I think with the advent of Rotten Tomatoes and people having being able to blog things like that, that they kind of influence a little bit more rather than the critics going back when. So a couple points. One, to go back to Roger Ebert, I've asked myself this question before, and I've read a lot of his reviews, like not just watching the show, but like really reading them. I'm 60-40 when it comes to like agreeing. There's 40% where I disagree with him,
It's not
but
bad.
it's the way he writes that makes it feel like when he never, like, you're right. There are critics that are very pompous that are like I would say like Kenneth Turan, who used to work for the Times. He's a little bit more on that side, but Roger Ebert would make it seem like it is a conversation that he explains to you that it's not just so much about the movie making, but like how he actually feels as he's watching the movie, and he's just much better with words at it than anyone else that I know that did or has ever done movie critique, at least in this kind of version. But especially with, Captain Marvel is a good example, right? That movie was getting shit on before it even came out, and it kind of affect how the box office maybe worked or not worked. And we kind of see the trend on both ends now, so it'll be interesting to see kind of what that's going to look like in the coming years. The last segment we'll do, it'll say let's agree to two. So we're gonna name our top 5 films that are not have already been picked that are is slotted in. We're gonna go from 5 to 3, 2 and 1 as we share. So I'll start off first. At the number 5 slot, I have the first Shrek. I think that's just to me very great voice acting. As much as the fairy tale aspect of it is very cool to watch, I think Eddie Murphy does have a big presence as Donkey that carries the movie. Number 4, I have Doctor Doolittle. I like the movie.
Yeah,
It's a very fun
that's on mine
family
too.
movie, and him interacting with the CGI. I absolutely have a delight when I watch that movie compared to Robert Downey Jr.'s Doolittle, which is absolute trash. I just,
Oh my gosh, did I block that out of my memory?
I hope you
Oh,
did. You
Oh, I
should.
did. Yeah.
It's just
Wow.
it just was not good. Like I got what they were trying to do, and it just never worked. It just didn't.
They were trying to
Right?
do Sherlock Holmes, but Doctor Doolittle.
Correct. That's all they were trying to do. And number 3 is very relatively new. It's Dolomite is my name. I think this is a very good comeback. I love
On my
the
list as
work
well.
that he's done on there. Like I said, when we talked about from like the early 2000s until now, there's been a very big lull if it was not a movie named Shrek 2 or Shrek 3. So it's like very good to form, and he was on his A game, and Netflix gave him a lot praise for him, like kind of taking that chance at Netflix taking that chance with him, and so it kind of paid off. So those right now are my 5 to 3. So we'll go Joe next here.
brutal. Okay, so 5 to 3. So my fifth. Here's a question. I guess the question is, if we can't pick Beverly Hills Cop, can we pick any of the sequels? And if so, um, if we
It's your
can't,
list, homie.
well, how we're limited to we can't pick movies that we picked on the other
The
categories.
goal, yeah. So the goal of the list is for us to see what 5 movies we have,
Now let me ask.
regardless of what it is, and then that way we can kind of
How about
debate and then
this?
try to get
Can
2
I
in.
can I pick Raw? Is
Yes.
Yeah.
that considered a movie? Okay, so I'll
God,
do
that's a
Raw.
good
Even
pull. Damn.
so I'll pick that because he's a classic stand-up, man. It's gonna be great. I'm still a big fan of Beverly Hill Cop 2. I'm gonna go with Dose for number 4, and I I don't think we picked this in the other ones, but the Nutty Professor. It's a lot of people are gonna say it's a lot of cheap laughs, and I think a lot of people would agree. But I got a good laugh out of it. I think I enjoyed it when I watched it when I was a kid. But I gotta say the sequel was not great. I was never a big fan of the sequel. And I think that with a lot of these, I think it applies to a lot of sequels, not necessarily Eddie Murphy, but if an original movie does well, almost every production company will always sign on for a second one, like almost always, unless the director or whatever writer says no. They'll try to cash that in, and if that does well, you do a third one. And I think for almost every trilogy, you'll look at that and they'll keep going. But yeah, that's my 5 to 3, and I'm happy with it.
All right, Jared, how about you?
You had 2. God, you guys picked all mine. I'm going to talk about the one that you guys haven't talked about, because those were all in mine.
That's fair.
Is 48 Hours. 48 Hours was a really, Johnny said earlier that he wasn't really a big fan, but and that's totally valid, like the reasons why, but I really liked his play with Nick Nolte. I think it was the way they play off each other was really good. I think they worked really well together. And you can totally tell it was the kind of the precursor of. I mean, it was made 5 years before it, but you could totally actually was it 5 years before? No, it was. How long between the two? But anyway, you could totally tell it was kind of the moment where people were like, "Oh, this like Eddie could, possibly lead his own movie kind of thing."
Oh yeah, that's true.
Um,
I'd have to agree with that.
and then my other one is one that hasn't really been mentioned yet. Was a movie he did with Dan Aykroyd called Trading
Trading
Places.
Places.
Trading Places I remember watching Trading Places because it was one of those movies when we were younger. It would always play on HBO or one of those
Yep,
as
for
kind of
sure.
like a Saturday afternoon at like 3 p.m. filler. You know, you're
Yep,
just kind of home and you're like, oh, okay, what's this movie? Whoa, this is funny.
yep.
It's one of those rare Dan Aykroyd kind of very funny movies that he was in that's not kind of like Ghostbusters or anything like that. Trading Places was just so funny. I love that movie, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend seeing it because his play off of Dan Aykroyd and everything like that is just so good. I just love it when Eddie. I like it when Eddie's solo, but Eddie's best in his movies when he's playing off of other very funny people. You see it in 48 Hours. You see it in Beverly Hills Cop with multiple people. Like the best parts of Beverly Hills Cop is when he's with the two other cops or playing off the art dealer or all that kind of stuff. Very rarely is Eddie in his movies funny as the only person on screen, at least in my opinion. Even in, I guess, Nutty Professor, when he's playing off of himself, question mark, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
he's all of those,
Bounce.
characters,
Yep.
but he's playing off of them in a way that is very funny and very great.
I think that's his strength, just doing that kind of thing. So I'm with you on that.
To me, as we're coming through number two for everyone here, that's what I have as my number two movie from Eddie Murphy,
Oh,
which is
hell
The
yeah.
Nutty Professor. I absolutely love this movie. I think him transforming himself to all these different characters, even though they kind of have their shades of the same one, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it is really funny just to see him get up, and that's usually when he's at his best. And shout out to Tom Scheideck. I think that's the name. That's the director. Let me tell you. So he did Nutty Professor, but let me tell you, during this era, he also made Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. He made
Ooh.
Liar Liar. He made Patch Adams. He also
Killing it.
made Bruce
Just
Almighty. Like
killing
this
it.
guy is just he gets comedy, and so for me, the number two movie I have here is The Nutty Professor. How about you, Joe? What do you have as your number two?
Number two. Okay, so my number two movie is gonna be Shrek the Third, and it's okay. So here's the thing, right? And I don't know. I've been a big fan of the Shrek movies, and I think with a lot, unfortunately, for a lot of trilogies for either comedies, animated films, or any real movie, the third one tends to be eh. Like for example, for the Matrix, the third one wasn't really the best one. Or like at the very least, I'm like I'm kind of getting bored of it. They should kind of wrap it up, sort of thing. Third one, though, I still think they maintained a good quality on it. I think that they were able to keep everyone on board. I think that the story writing is fine. Obviously, the animation improved over time. Also, I just realized it made $800 million, so still a success. And so that's saying everything. I think that I think Eddie Murphy still did an excellent job as a donkey, and I think Jared said before he's an excellent, I guess, for a voice actor he does well. And I gotta say, voice. I mean, I don't know any experience about this, but I think voice acting seems to be an easier job than actually being on set and acting.
I don't
Just
know.
sitting on a
It's pretty demanding at times, I
yeah,
would say.
doing lines, but at the very least, not
Yeah,
everyone
I get
has
what
to
you
be
mean.
there. You could just be like, all right, we're gonna have Mike Myers come in on Monday and do lines for 5 hours. We don't need anyone else, so we will see you later in the week, sort of thing. So I think it's a lot more doable, is all. I think that I don't know. I just liked it. I know that a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and that's totally fair. It's a personal choice. Shrek the Third. Boom.
And you, Jared, at number two?
Number two will is probably or is Shrek 2. We've already talked about it. I'm just going to reiterate that I feel it's when that series is at its peak, like maybe not box office or whatever, but I think creatively, story wise, and everything, it's definitely at its peak of where that series went. Like, I made the joke of hot human Shrek, but but I think it's where the series was most creative. I feel it's way before it got really just kind of rote and like, oh god, another Shrek movie, more Smash Mouth, and like that kind of stuff.
I love
Um,
Smash Mouth.
and
Just because of
like
the movie, that's it.
it's and then like the kids I work with at school, I'm an aide for kids at a high school, and they know that they love that movie, and they know that movie because of the music as well, and they just it just goes over and over. And like we watched it recently in class, and I was just like, man, this movie is really funny. Like, and that's all I'll say. We covered it earlier, but yeah, go ahead, Johnny.
We got to number one, and I'm going to shock you guys because apparently Jared doesn't like this movie, but I
Uh oh.
absolutely love it. It's freaking Bowfinger. That
Oh my
movie
god,
is so good. It
Johnny.
is so hilarious. I don't know what you're. You need to go rewatch that movie
But
again, Jared. That movie is
I will.
so
Yeah,
good.
I'll rewatch it.
It just him with Steve Martin was so good together. The idea of like them trying it has the producers type of feel of like they're trying to make they're trying to fail and accidentally doing it. It just works on the comedic level, works on so many levels. The fact that you have these movies, Heather Graham's also in it, Robert Downey Jr., Terrence Stamp, like these guys, for some
Mhm.
reason, it's funny because I watched it in high school and I thought it was funny, and then a couple weeks ago I rewatched it and it's still funny. Like I was shocked at how much I was laughing. Like there's a lot of movies that I'm probably missing out here, right? Probably, you talked about Trading Places before. Movie like Life, which is whatever.
Mhm.
I didn't think it was
The
funny at all,
Golden
right?
Child,
But
really good.
good, right?
Oh my
So,
god.
but to me, if we're talking about best, and even though to me, it was Beverly Hills Cop, but since we already have it on that list, this just got bumped up to number one. It's Bowfinger for me.
If I'm next, I I sort of forget if this was on the list. It's Mulan. Is Mulan on this list? Like, we didn't say it before, right? It doesn't
Correct.
matter. It's my list. Now, I liked Mulan. I'm a big fan of all these classic Disneys. You could clearly tell that the reason that the second new Mulan did poorly is because there's no motherfucking Eddie Murphy in it. All right. I would also say that Leah Slanga not singing any of these things was an absolute tragedy. I think that she should have. It's not like she died or anything. She's completely available to sing, and she's just as good. Off topic, but the reason the second Mulan, there's no goddamn comedic relief, and it has to be Mushu. I don't know if this because the Chinese government says, nah, don't put this dragon on there, but I think that and I realize that I pick all these movies where Eddie Murphy seems to take on like a secondary role or a supporting role,
Well,
but
that's where, like I was talking about earlier, that's where he's kind of the best. He's
exactly.
playing off of the lead or somebody else, or
Yeah, he's the pure comic relief in this movie.
uh-huh.
If you edit this movie out minus Mushu, it just becomes an oddly serious movie for kids, or I would assume for kids. And because you're sending your daughter off to go get killed, or she's pretending to be a dude, and then the captain falls in love with her and questions his sexuality, blah blah blah. But I don't know. I really liked it. I think that he did a great job, and I think that um, the movie overall is great. But
All right, Jared, who do you have as number one?
I'm gonna cop out as like doing a kind of a joke answer at first.
oof,
Um, and it's Ghostbusters with Eddie Murphy as cast in it, as he was originally supposed to be.
ooh,
He originally was supposed to be in Ghostbusters. It was him and John Candy with Dan Aykroyd.
Bill Murray.
I don't think it was Bill Murray. I think it was Harold Ramis.
Really? Okay.
And I want to see the alternate timeline of that movie because I think it would be fantastic. But also that means we wouldn't get Eddie Murphy as Beverly Hills Cop, so that would be kind of a trade off.
Well, you have two alternate lines. You have the Ghostbusters coming in 2016 with the ladies, and you have the Ghostbusters with the kids. So there's
I can't wait for Ghostbusters is my favorite movie of all time.
the old one, the
The,
first one.
yeah, the first one.
Okay.
It's absolutely my favorite. I know this isn't a Ghostbusters podcast. We're gonna wait for something for a future podcast, and I will gush about my love of that movie there. But I think that's my most interesting pick. But Joe, like you said Eddie Murphy's Raw. That's
Yeah.
probably. I think that's my I think that's my number one now. As soon as you brought that up, that's Eddie
Yeah,
Murphy's Raw
man.
is my number one. He wouldn't have any sort of career if it wasn't for that. He was taking he was taking risks down to what he was wearing. That leather ass suit that he's
Oh yeah.
wearing, the bright red,
Full leather suit.
the way, and to be so kind of controversial at the time that like Bill Cosby was America's, he was,
Sweetheart.
yeah, oh yeah, he was
Yeah.
America's dad at like a point. I mean, this was before the Cosby Show, but he was getting flack from all sides, and he was still doing it real. He was still,
I mean, it's a gamble.
it,
It sort of paid off.
he was
gotta
really,
say.
he took that Richard Pryor influence and just boom, it became like the biggest deal in America. And we can talk about what ifs all the time, but if there was no Eddie Murphy Raw, I don't think he would have nearly as big of a career.
It put him on the map. It definitely put him on the map.
From all the movies that we've listed, I think there's 3 that we have to narrow down to 2. So just like you guys talked about for Eddie Murphy's Raw, a seminal part, especially with stand-up being a movie, things like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
We have Shrek 2,
Yeah.
which we've come to agree that it's probably the best out of the 3 Shreks.
I could say that, yeah.
And then we also have Nutty Professor, the first one, just of all is acting and kind of the accolade. So from looking at your guys' list and my list, that we've come down to these 3 movies. So we have to boot one off the island. Who are we kicking off?
Oh, Nutty Professor, easily.
Nutty Professor. Like,
you guys are nuts.
Nah, sorry, dude. I don't know. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, again, all 3 movies are great. I just like the other 2 better.
Well, the other 2 are like, I don't know. I don't think there's that much reverence for Nutty Professor when you look at the larger scope of things. It's definitely not Raw because it's just not like there. You look at all the stuff that kind of, I guess, accomplished. I don't know if that's the word, but you look, Johnny, why don't you make the case for it being Nutty Professor? I want to hear.
So to me, Shrek 2 is probably, it should be there. I believe Nutty Professor should be there simply because of the range of acting that he had to do throughout the entire movie. Look at how many characters. I mean,
yeah, but you said earlier it was based on the same character. It's like all one.
It's a little bit shades of that, right? But I think there's a comedic genius between the 2. Yes, you are right. But at the same time, I really understand the seminal point of Raw. I'm not going to take that away from people.
Mm-hmm.
I just ask people if it actually holds up.
I think it does.
Well, okay.
Not all the way.
See, yeah, this is kind of where
comedy
is very hard, right?
If we're going, if we're going by today's standards of comedy, I can see a lot of people being like, "Whoa, he uses language that is insane." So with that, I can probably agree with you. There's a lot, but there's also stuff in Nutty Professor that is true. That's kind of that's kind of brutal,
I think I agree with that a lot. I just don't. I guess in terms of stand up, when we think of Raw, I just don't know if, granted, anywhere was really good at it. When we think of top 5 stand ups as a movie, like simply as a movie, I just don't know if his stand up actually holds up amongst, Chris Rock's Never Scared or Black and White or Dave Chappelle's couple of things like that.
You can't compare Dave Chappelle to anyone. He's like his own stratosphere.
Correct. Even Robin Williams has his own.
Yeah. Okay. I can say that.
And that to me is like,
yeah,
he was good in the moment and stuff like that. Shrek 2, I actually understand because there's a longitude of what it is you're talking about.
Yeah.
And Nutty Professor, the only reason why I also think of this is because, you guys all watch Tropic Thunder. I never would have thought they were going to spoof that on the club.
Yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying. You're saying it just because he played like 19 roles and basically talked to himself for the whole movie.
Correct. It's not
So
like
it.
It's not like I'm saying Norbit should be there, right?
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah,
right. Okay. Well,
Johnny, I'll come around. I'll agree with you that Ross should probably be off this list. It should probably be.
fine, fine,
Yeah.
fine. It won't
I'm
happen
not.
that often, but this time I will. I'll let it happen. I'll let it ride.
I'm just saying.
That's
I
fine.
understand what it is. So you guys, so we come up with this list that we define as top 5 for Eddie Murphy. We come with the box office champion. We agreed it's Beverly Hills Cops, which to a lot of us is probably number one if it wasn't even there in the first place. When it comes to the field of excellence, we have Dreamgirls. For Did We Get This Wrong? We talked about Harlem Nights and how we kind of side more with the audience than we did with the critics there. And then with Let's Agree to Two, we have Nutty Professor, and we also have Shrek 2 that's on there. So if you guys haven't watched any Eddie Murphy movies, which would actually be very hard for me to think of, but if
That
you
can't be
haven't,
possible.
I would start with one of these 5 here and kind of build your way out as you kind of go through his filmography because he does have a lot of lulls in the middle, but when he was at his peak, it is great action, but also great comedy. He is just a comedic genius for that. All right, guys, and you know this is kind of when we do where the plugs is. So we actually now have an Instagram, a Twitter, not so much Facebook yet. We'll get there, but at least those two. If you guys want to find us, we're at Film Lovers GTTG. Again, that's across all those platforms there. Jared, tell them where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at jluthy, JLUTHY. I tweet about just random stuff and sometimes pro wrestling, and because pro wrestling is everything. No, I'm just kidding, but it is. Sports and that kind of stuff like that. The baseball season's ramping up, so I have some takes on that and just kind of other stuff. What about?
You can find me on Netflix, Hulu, Peacock, Disney Plus, HBO Max, because
God,
I'll
I'm
be
so
watching stuff.
upset at all these streaming platforms. Can we talk about that? It's just awful.
That's a great topic too. My second topic. I have a lot of stupid ideas. One of the topics is talk about all the Fast and Furious 1 through 10.
Oh, we'll do that when Fast and Furious 9 comes
I
out.
can't.
Oh,
I,
fine. It's the worst.